She hovered near the counter for a long moment before speaking, as if courage were something she had to physically gather from the air. The diner was warm, almost painfully so after the cold outside, and it made her aware of every tear in her coat, every scuff on her shoes. Grease popped on the grill behind the counter, plates clinked, and a jukebox hummed softly, ordinary sounds from a world that suddenly felt unreachable to her. Her voice came out small. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you." The manager didn't look up at first. He was counting receipts, jaw tight, pen tapping the counter like an impatient metronome. "What is it?" he said, already annoyed. She swallowed. "I have children outside. It's cold. I was wondering if there was any food you were going to throw away. Just something they could eat." She gestured weakly toward the door, where the faint outline of two small figures could be seen through the fogged glass. The manager finally looked at her, eyes scanning her from head to toe. His expression shifted, not to concern, but contempt. "This isn't a charity," he said loudly. A few customers glanced over, then quickly looked away. "People pay for food here." "I know," she whispered. "I'm not asking for free meals. Just leftovers. Please." That word, "please," seemed to irritate him more than anything. His face flushed, and he leaned across the counter, invading her space. "You can't just walk in here begging," he snapped. "You're making customers uncomfortable." Her hands shook as she tried to explain. "They haven't eaten since yesterday. I'll leave right after." "That's enough." He stepped around the counter, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. "Get out." When she didn't move fast enough, frozen between humiliation and desperation, he shoved her shoulder. It wasn't hard enough to injure, but it was enough. She stumbled, lost her footing, and fell against a chair, landing on the floor with a soft, broken sound. The diner went silent. No one rushed to help. No one spoke up. She pushed herself up slowly, face burning, eyes wet but defiant as she looked toward the door, toward her children waiting in the cold, wondering how she would explain that even asking had been too much. The diner door opened with a sharp jingle, cutting through the silence like a blade. Cold air rushed in, carrying the low, rolling growl of motorcycle engines. Heads turned. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. The sound wasn't aggressive, but it was heavy, like a storm settling in right outside the windows. Boots hit the tile floor, slow and deliberate. One biker entered, then another, then several more. Leather jackets creaked as they moved, dark with road dust and stitched patches faded by years of sun. Their presence filled the room without a single word being spoken. They didn't rush. They didn't stare people down. They simply observed, eyes scanning the diner the way men do when they already know something is wrong. They saw the woman first, kneeling beside the overturned chair, trying to stand with dignity she shouldn't have had to defend. One biker, broad-shouldered with gray threaded through his beard, paused. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Another noticed the manager still standing over her, face flushed, fists clenched, trying to look powerful in the sudden quiet. The manager scoffed, forcing a laugh that rang hollow. "We're closed to loiterers," he said, louder than necessary. "Order something or move along." No one answered him. Instead, the bearded biker stepped forward and crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over the woman. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Ma'am," he said, holding out a hand, "are you hurt?" She hesitated, then took it. His grip was steady, warm. He helped her to her feet and shrugged off his jacket, placing it around her shoulders before she could protest. The leather was heavy, smelled faintly of wind and fuel and something solid, protection. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." Another biker turned to the manager. Younger, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. What happened here? The manager's confidence cracked, just a hairline fracture. She was causing a problem, he muttered. "Begging. I told her to leave." A biker near the door crossed his arms, blocking the exit without meaning to, or maybe meaning to just enough. The room felt smaller now. Denser. Customers shifted in their booths, sensing the moral weight of the moment. "She asked for food," the bearded biker said quietly. It wasn't a question. The manager opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came out. The bikers didn't threaten him. They didn't have to. Their silence spoke of lines drawn, of things that mattered. And in that stillness, the power in the room changed hands completely. The bikers didn't wait for permission. They moved with a quiet authority that made the diner seem smaller, the air thicker, and the manager more conspicuous in his guilt. One of them, the tallest, stepped to the counter, placing a few bills down. The paper was crisp, the amount more than enough for a meal for the woman and her children. His hand lingered on the counter for a moment, as if to emphasize that generosity didn't need approval. "Order what she needs," he said simply, voice calm but firm. "Don't make this difficult." The manager hesitated, his eyes darting between the bikers, the money, and the woman, who now clutched the leather jacket tighter around her shoulders. His face reddened, his earlier bluster evaporating like mist. He muttered something under his breath, but it was lost beneath the soft scrape of chairs as one biker pulled a seat out for the woman to sit. Plates began to arrive, steaming and fragrant, the smell of soup and bread filling the diner. It was ordinary food, but to her it smelled like a feast. One biker knelt beside her, leaning closer so her children, now allowed inside, could see him. "Eat," he said gently, pushing a plate toward them. "It's okay." The children's eyes widened, small hands reaching eagerly. For the first time that day, there was no fear in their faces, only the hesitant joy of something warm, something safe. The woman's lips trembled as she thanked the bikers, her voice cracking. One simply nodded, shrugging off thanks with modesty, as if it were no heroism at all, just the right thing to do. The manager hovered, awkward and unsure, as plates continued to pile on the counter. Customers peeked over their menus, some with relief, others with lingering judgment, but the bikers ignored them, focused solely on the woman and her children. The warmth of the food and the human kindness in the room began to dissolve the tension like sunlight on frost. When the last plate was served, the bikers quietly stood. Engines were waiting, humming just beyond the glass doors. One placed a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder, the gesture both protective and final. "Take care of them," he said, eyes meeting hers with a rare sincerity. She nodded, tears spilling freely now, not from fear or shame, but from relief. The children laughed softly as they dug into the meal, their tiny voices echoing like music she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Outside, the rumble of motorcycles faded into the night, leaving behind the lingering warmth of humanity, the faint scent of leather, and the profound lesson that kindness can arrive when least expected, but when most needed. The manager, alone behind the counter, finally understood. His pride had been a poor shield. He had underestimated the quiet strength of those who saw injustice and chose to act. And the memory of the bikers, quiet, firm, and unshakable, would linger far longer than any complaint he had ever voiced. The diner, once filled with tension and hostility, now seemed to breathe with a different rhythm. The air smelled of warm bread, simmering soup, and the faint tang of leather that the bikers had left behind. The woman sat at a corner table, the jacket draped over her shoulders, shielding her from more than just the chill. It was a symbol of the protection she hadn't known she could receive from strangers. Her children, cheeks flushed with warmth and excitement, laughed softly between bites, their small voices weaving through the diner like music that had been missing for too long. The bikers lingered for a moment, not out of arrogance but to ensure that the immediate danger and humiliation had fully passed. One sat at the edge of a booth, quietly observing, making sure the manager stayed in check. Another adjusted his jacket and glanced toward the door, engines humming faintly outside, ready to roar back to life. Their presence was calm but firm, a silent assurance that the woman and her children were safe and that any further cruelty would not go unnoticed. The manager, now slumped behind the counter, finally met the woman's gaze. His chest rose and fell with a mixture of guilt and disbelief. The harshness in his eyes had softened, replaced by the understanding that came too late. He had underestimated the impact of a simple act of kindness and the consequences of his cruelty. Every second he spent watching the bikers leave, and the warmth they had brought with them, was a lesson etched into his mind, that compassion, not authority, carries real power. Outside, the engines roared to life, echoing into the night as the bikers mounted their motorcycles. The woman's children pressed their faces against the glass, waving timidly as the riders slowly disappeared down the road, their lights cutting through the darkness. She hugged her kids tightly, feeling the weight of exhaustion and relief press down on her simultaneously. The warmth of the diner had seeped into her bones, a physical and emotional reprieve from the cold that had gripped her just an hour earlier. The woman realized, Amidst the quiet aftermath, that she had asked for nothing more than scraps to feed her children, yet she had received dignity, safety, and human connection. She would never forget the calm authority in the biker's eyes, the unspoken promise that kindness matters, and that cruelty can be met with consequences beyond what one expects. In that small diner on a cold night, the ordinary world had been interrupted by extraordinary humanity, and the ripple of that night would linger long after the engines had faded into the distance. Her children laughed again, louder this time, free and warm, and she finally allowed herself to smile, knowing that even in the harshest moments, hope could arrive on wheels, engines roaring, and hearts unyielding.